Welcome to Fire Engineering's Wednesday live Google Hangout for Wednesday, July 26th. I'm PJ Norwood here in New Haven, Connecticut with Frank Ricci. We have a great show lined up today. We have Bill Carey joining us today, and we're going to be talking about line of duty death statistics and how they're truly affecting the fire service and what's truly behind the numbers. But before we get started, we wanted to always reach out and thank our sponsor, Tincata. Tincata's been involved in the fire service and providing fabrics for us since 1982 when they first started. It's actually since '69 since they first started providing fabrics to the Cleveland Fire Department, Ohio. They're a big fan of the fire service. They work really hard each and every day between research and science and putting a good product out there to help keep us safer. In actuality, there's 7 out of 10 of us wearing Tincata fabrics, regardless of what type of gear that you're wearing, like who puts those fabrics together. The majority of us are wearing gear that's put together and built with Tincata fabrics, and they're the only fabric on the market that's inherently fire resistant without any chemicals added to the protective clothing. Protects us, where they're not adding anything that's going to create any types of hazards or carcinogens to us. I know that's one of the big things that Frank always enjoys hearing and talking about, is what they're doing for us really affects the long-term health and safety of us as well as our members. So I'd like to also thank Frank for joining us today. Frank's had a busy morning here in New Haven. He was out at a technical rescue. If you saw us running around here about 6 minutes ago trying to get up and running, you'd think this was it was quite comical this morning. Frank?
It always takes longer than you think when you got somebody on the line. But members of the rescue companies in the city today did a phenomenal job. I'll post some pictures up on Twitter. But under Chief Alston, who writes for Fire Engineering, teaches for us at FDIC, we're taking all hazardous response to the city of New Haven, and he's letting the members train. And we're talking about line of duty deaths today, and a lot of it comes down to physical fitness, training, and taking care of mental health. But sometimes training gets pushed to that unrealistic realm, and we always want it in the realistic realm. And the chief and myself, our vision has always been the same. If we're going to ask a member to do it at 3 o'clock in the morning, they should be able to do it at a time when it's a little bit safer, with a little bit more engineered safety controls to make sure at 3 o'clock in the morning they're going to perform safely, efficiently, and effectively.
And, I couldn't agree with you more. Seeing how your department's progressed over the last couple of years makes me proud to be a bordering neighbor and a mutual aid company. So thank you for what you do. So today's show, we wanted to dive into line of duty deaths a little bit. And I've been following Bill Carey, and Bill Carey is I guess his short title is online news manager, as he puts it, for Penwell Fire Engineering. And, if we actually had to sit here and talk about all the things that he actually does, it would take up the whole show. So we're just going to stick with the online news manager. But, he's he's in the fire service. He teaches for fire service. He writes for Fire Engineering Penwell. And he's been doing a phenomenal job at not just looking at the number of line of duty deaths. All too often we hear, we lost 100 firefighters, we lost 70 firefighters, we lost 80 firefighters. But not a lot of us in the fire service truly understand what that number means, and what the research and the statistics and what that number truly represents on how the members of the fire service are dying each and every year. And Bill's been researching this and really breaking it down for us, and he challenges us to truly know the information and truly know the statistics of how we're dying. Are we dying only on the fire ground? Are we dying in the firehouse after training? Are we dying during training? Yes, all the above. But where should we really be focusing our efforts to have a significant impact on that number?
What I like what Bill's doing is he's not getting stuck in that myopic view of just our combat deaths. He's really looking at the big picture, because if you read some of the blogs nowadays, you would think we were getting killed in flashover every second, and that's really not where we're getting killed. So we are doing a good job as a fire department. We could always do better, but I like that Bill's taking a global view of really what's killing us, so that we could kind of mold that into our programs to keep firefighters safe.
Yeah, and he's not holding back. He's telling people maybe some things that they don't want to hear, but he's giving us the hard facts of what's truly going on in the fire service. And Erich Roden wrote a great piece, and he apologizes for not making it here. He may make it towards the end of the show. He was supposed to be with us today. But June 26th, he wrote a great piece in FireRescue called Wiping Face Pieces, where he actually says, I'm going to quote this, "It's time to look internally at the causes of firefighter injury and death. We apparently have made tremendous strides with fireground safety and control measures." So we're acknowledging that we've done some good work, but there's much more work to be done. And that's where Bill comes in. And Bill, we thank you for joining us today. We thank you for everything that you do for the fire service every day, let alone this project that you've been working on. So enlighten us, Bill, a little bit. Tell us how this started for you, and where we're going, and how do you feel that we're going to truly make an impact on line of duty deaths, on decreasing those numbers?
Well, thanks for asking me on. I gotta go back and just make a small correction, because we're a huge group in the Penwall Fire Group, but I primarily work for Firefighter Nation, the FireRescue magazine. So I'm a backup to my coworker and friend Pete Pericchio and Chris McLean on engineering apparatus, but just want to make sure that that's straight for them as far as how we all work together. This started for me way back. I guess back even more than 10 years or so ago. Just the idea of we constantly always heard, and we still do, that notion of 100 firefighters die every year, and then also when people kind of take that and they rip and they go, they see an incident posted somewhere, or a video or a photo posted somewhere, and they go, this is why we're killing 100 firefighters every year. So I just started looking into it just as a matter of habit, and then it just became a bit more of a borderline obsession in order to do it. Just how are we really dying, and what is our actual definition of line of duty death, or on duty death, as the USFA, the United States Fire Administration, puts out. So it's just a matter of that, and then just looking into the actual numbers beyond the lump sum, and breaking down even the categories themselves into other subsections, looking at the narratives from each notification or from the news stories, and then partnering that back up with any type of either NIOSH or department investigative report. So you can get a better definition of what our firefighter fatality data really is. And it's surprising in a lot of areas. It's every year there's good news that unfortunately we're not always promoting as far as our organizations and our industry. And then every year is also bad news that we're not always promoting. So that's how it kind of took off for me. And then now it's just become a regular thing to keep track of the data, and also to, I don't know, it gives us more, instead of just meat and potatoes numbers, it gives us more substance of where we can go to try to reduce this number each year.
Well, I think you're doing a phenomenal job. You're bringing an awareness to line of duty deaths that I've never seen before in the fire service. By breaking it down, there's a lot of fire service, or of just community in general, but they only want to read the synopsis. They want to read the summary, or the executive summary. They don't want to truly dive into, like you said, the meat and potatoes of what's truly going on. And I think that's what, and I know that's what you're actually doing there, and we appreciate it. So let's talk about some of those meat and potato stuff. What are the things that really stand out to you during your research, you're finding that you think that we should be maybe looking at a little bit differently?
Well, for this year particularly, vehicles are killing us more this year than in past, mainly because whether you're driving in it, riding in it, or struck by it, that's where we're seeing a high number of firefighters being killed this year. Also, that trended high last year as well. So there might be an effort where we need to revisit seatbelt initiatives, safe driving, safe operating initiatives, and also highway safety initiatives. Those areas might need to be reviewed. On the opposite of that, we're being inundated almost daily socially about fire behavior and fire behavior lessons and significant fire events, but we're trending on a downward slope of firefighters actually killed by adverse or catastrophic fire events, especially when you look in the category of advancing hose lines. That's a broad category in this area of the firefighter fatality data, and pretty much if you were to take that number of that category each year, it would look quite large relative to the deaths each year throughout. But if you really understand that category includes basically if the victim held a hose line at some point during the incident and then was killed, it also includes wildland firefighters. You open that up to a huge range of of numbers that can be in there. So when you could take that and look into, how the number of those firefighters who are actually killed inside a burning structure by some type of fire event or structure event, that number is also very low. I mean, this year we are at, well, when the first half of this year, to cover this subject for this discussion, we had a total of 4 firefighters killed under the activity type of advancing hose lines. 3 of those were due to medical issues on the scene, not necessarily due to a fire event or a building construction event. And then 1 was due to injury sustained from a fire in previous years. So it smartly counters the argument that we're dying in flashovers or we're dying in those things. It works that way to give us a more realistic picture of what's causing these fatalities.
One of the slides I put up at FDIC is a picture of a deer in my backyard, because deer kill more people in America than fires. It's about 100 people die each year from deer. Nobody's freaking out about deers, but we do need to be safer and understand the fire behavior and be aggressive, but be smart while we're being aggressive, and take in all these lessons to improve our tactical dispositions. It seems that medical issues always seems to be the leading cause. The one thing that we see on the fire ground that we really have to be cognizant of is it's not just simply the medical issue of the guy who has the heart attack in the chair at the firehouse or kitchen table, but when somebody has a medical issue when they're advancing the hose line, it takes on it's a totally different animal, and it really jeopardizes other members operating on scene. You have to employ the rapid intervention team. You could have the breakdown in command. So having that medical emergency on scene is tragic. And I'll say this as somebody who struggles with my weight. I go out and I run every other day, 3 miles. So the other day I was at 9:11, 9:21, and like 9:30 last night on my run. But for the guys out there, you want to be serious about the fire department. You got to be serious about physical fitness. And I feel for you, because I like to eat, I like to drink, and I struggle with it. But I still know that I have to maintain a certain amount of cardiovascular output when on the fire ground or a rescue situation. So I make sure that I'm at least going running 3 miles every other day. And that tends to translate well for when I go into a fire. I feel pretty good when I come out. But we need to do a better job with physical fitness. Would you agree? I think that's one of the...
I would agree, and I know Bill will have much more to say on this, but I absolutely do agree that we have to do a better job. But that takes a personal accountability piece, which unfortunately everybody in our departments aren't going to take that personal accountability. So there's also that piece, and I'm not sure where that line is of how much the departments need to take control over physical fitness and their personnel while they're working. I truly believe departments should have pure fitness trainers and solid physical fitness programs in place, not to weed out employees, not to get rid of employees, but to make sure that they could function appropriately on the scene. I don't think that's asking too much when we're, you talk about the career departments, we're employing these individuals, so we have a little bit more control. But now you look at the bigger piece of the fire service, we're dealing with volunteers across the country. There's more volunteers in America than there are paid firefighters. So that's a difficult piece to manage and to require.
It absolutely is. And, we can make that leap without making it punitive, where you kind of put the person on a pathway to success, but it is extremely difficult. And Bill, what are you seeing in the volunteer departments? I mean, are there any programs out there where they're really pushing the physical fitness on the volunteer side?
Well, the national organizations like the National Volunteer Fire Council and the NFFF and the Everyone Goes Home program, those are being promoted through the volunteer service. The biggest thing with physicals though is when we have like notification of a firefighter who dies of some type of medical cause or struggle like that, it's easy for everybody for readers and such to say, oh well, this is why you need to have physical standards, this is why you need to have fitness standards, stuff like that. And I think people don't really understand the two coins the two sides of that coin of the argument. One, in your case, to just right off the bat implement some type of fitness and physical standard, that involves a contract issue. with your members. Because again, you don't want it to end up becoming punitive for guys who are already in there, you know, and such. The volunteer side, the old argument of the volunteer side is this will kill our staffing, this will shut us down. So it's always a personal issue on the volunteer side. I mean, you're gonna have to take care of yourself. You know, you should be taking care of yourself regardless of what your vocation is. But then also a leadership side. If physical fitness is such a scare that you're afraid it's going to hurt your staffing, and then you have other concerns than the members' wellness to be addressed. You need to address basically, you know, what service you can adequately provide to your community on the volunteer side. One good note through this year is that we're seeing a trend of, regarding the age of our fatalities, the younger firefighters aren't dying as they did in years past. Now we have, you know, the youngest one this year so far is 19, and that was due to a tree snag falling in a wildfire. But firefighters age 51 and older are making up the bulk of this year's line of duty deaths. They make up the bulk of last year's. And so I think it's hard to track or be able to. What you have is this the new generation now that's into, you know, the CrossFit and the workout days and such like that. You know, they're your recruits, they're your first year firefighters. As they're going through, I think you'll see that group where you have the older firefighters, that number will gradually diminish probably in 20 or 30 years as those members come on. That especially might pay off even greatly more so for career departments, because you know you're hiring those guys that are coming in where exercise is like second nature to them, almost competitive in a sense in their own subculture. So they're bringing that into the department, and so as they age through their career, that affects that span of age of fatalities.
Well, that's a great point. I think, you know, going back a little bit as far as mandating programs, I think that if departments do a better job in just getting buy-in from the membership and encouraging and utilizing those subcategories for those younger firefighters and making sure that we give them the opportunities as well. So make sure that we don't have a lot of time during the day. If department like mine, we can't do this because we're small, but you know, here in New Haven, we're a little bigger. Give each company an hour a day where we take them out of service, so the guys or girls can, you know, exercise and work out during their day. I think there's things that we can do like that may increase the amount of physical fitness without, you know, really mandating programs that were going to affect some labor issues.
But even with not giving them an hour off, just allowing them and making it acceptable to work out. And now that everybody, Anthony Avillo and I are writing the safety chapter over for the firefighters. Handbook for fire engineering, and we made sure to include in there that the fire service is moving to that, I don't want to say CrossFit model because it's a brand, but to that functional fitness, which we're starting to see as an instructor at the academy, the individuals that tend to follow that Spartan or CrossFit or whatever the name brand is of that functional fitness, where it's, you know, it's where it's varied, is having a little bit more success with that. But having it accepted by the department. Some departments out there still frown upon companies, a guy even getting on the treadmill, or a company going to the park and playing a game of flag football, where when I was in Montgomery County, Maryland, that was the norm. You came into work, or even as a volunteer, in your sweatpants. The company would check out their equipment, eat a little breakfast, and then they would do something together for an hour, and that made a big difference. And I didn't see that in the Northeast when I came up here. So, and that was their first model. And while they're in with the International I Chiefs and the IFF on their wellness program, Montgomery County, Maryland's program first started off by, and this is 20 years ago, but it's a good way to start a program, is they brought in an exercise physiologist and they brought in some peer trainers, and they made some standard. And the guys and girls, as long as they were training and doing something every day, they were pretty much allowed on their own accord. And then if somebody failed the standard test at the end of the 6 months or the year, I forget what it was, then they would put that individual on a program. It wasn't punitive, but then they would work with that person to get back. And it was kind of like a motivating thing, because nobody wanted to work with that peer fitness person. They wanted to be able to be with the group to either play basketball or to go play Frisbee football or walk on the track or whatever everybody else is doing. So that might be something, and that was 22 years ago in Maryland that seemed to work to get everybody together, and now they're even more advanced.
But in addition to fitness, as you're talking about it, what I'm finding as I pair up the data with the subsequent reports that come out is we still have departments, career and volunteer, which aren't even requiring an initial medical screening to join. You know, I mean, there's departments that they're not requiring medical clearance to get fit testing. There's departments that aren't requiring even annual physical exams. So just something simple as having guys get a doctor's note, just to say, hey, you know, yeah, this guy's okay to do the job as you've outlined it here. We're unfortunately in the nation, you know, way far away from that coming across.
And then you look at some of those departments that are actually mandating physicals. What type of physicals are they? Are they actually quality physicals, and are they appropriate? Are they just you know, how many fingers am I holding? Let me just check your blood pressure. How do you feel? Okay, good, you're all set. Or is it a true, and I'm not saying it has to be an NFPA equivalent physical, but is it an appropriate physical? Of course, we would like it to be, but you know, we know that there are some departments that just can't afford that for all of their membership. So are the departments at least looking at the requirements of the NFPA physical and taking pieces and parts of that, but also making sure that the physicians understand what we actually do, and to make sure that we, you know, that we're at least healthy to do what we have to if we can't do the entire NFPA physical. And then it's not just a formality to check a box, that we're actually evaluating our membership and giving them a legitimate exam to make sure that they're healthy.
And health also comes down to nutrition. And I'm horrible at this because I got the exercise part down. I can't get the eating part down. That's the problem that I'm having. And I see a lot of guys in the firehouse where they'll go out and exercise, but exercise alone isn't going to make you lose weight. I can run and exercise with the best of them, but I got to do something with my diet. I got to change something.
I have the eating part down well.
Yeah.
Just all the wrong things.
I always love when skinny people talk about exercise, because it's like, you know, well, what about the rest of us?
So I'm just going to give this quick shout out. If anybody has any questions or wants to participate in the conversation, hashtag FETalk on Twitter, and we'll get to that. I'm just going to read one here. It says, talking about age and line of duty death injuries, where will we end up as pensions are pared down and members work longer? And that's maybe something that you could comment on, Frank. So they're talking about where will we end up as pensions are pared down and members work longer.
That's almost the new operational reality, with the operational reality of the economy and the ebbs and flows of the economy and how the private sector is going and how the country is going. Pensions are getting smaller and members are required to work longer. So this physical fitness and health thing is going to come into play more and more. One thing that's also interesting, Bill, for the paid departments that needs to be considered, that I'm seeing a trend in, and while it's anecdotal, the fact is it seems that fire departments are hiring older people, where when I came on the job 20 years ago, the mean age of a recruit class was probably about 21, 22. And now we're finding that average age in a recruit class in its 30s. It's almost like people are now migrating to the fire service as their second career, where it was the other way around before. Are you seeing that nationally? Because I'm wondering if that's going to start affecting our trends to kind of offset that CrossFit generation that's coming in.
You see,
We'll mute our end, so maybe we can limit that, Bill.
Okay, that's good. We see the occasional news stories and department press releases about their recruit classes, and where they, have guys that are older guys that are in there. Just a few weeks ago, we ran one across the sites that had an older adult. He was in the recruit class and passed. I don't know if there's enough of that going around in career departments to say it impacts our line of duty death data. Time may tell over the years, but again, that data is national data, and so that's a huge range. But as far as like with the hiring process, it might be just something where departments eye that one guy who's in his 40s or 50s as a solid employee to be, versus the 20-year-old who might be here for a year because he wants to get the gig in the department over, across the line. Might be a balance like that. Age is a big thing in the volunteer fire service as far as line of duty desks. Like I said earlier, we're seeing that range, and unfortunately this year we're seeing guys in the 70s and 80s dying, and they're dying mostly due to some type of a cardiac or stress event, or they're being struck out on the roadways in the terms of fire police. I think it was last year we had one that was 98. This year we've got one that's 83, one that's 80, and then a couple in their 70s. And that's it's hard to talk about that subject in a sense with others because there's so much emotion in there that they're giving their service to their community. But like I said earlier, if you're a volunteer chief and you're relying on that 72-year-old guy to be your engine tanker driver during the midday on the weekdays, that's a problem that needs to be looked at.
Bill, when you look at the trends, considering what we were talking about, that our combat deaths seem to be getting lower and lower, that seems to indicate that we are making a difference in the training community, firefighter nation, fire engineering, all of the certification standards, the focus on fire behavior, the focus on safe search tactics. So would you say that you can glean that from the data, is that we are making progress in some of those areas? It's kind of like that hazmat model where guys were getting and girls were getting killed at hazmats. The training came up, and now it's really rare to see somebody actually killed at a hazardous material incident.
Yeah, I think you can say that. It's hard to be specific about it though, because we don't really have anything in place that tracks education effectiveness from when it was implemented and throughout the process of reaching at least the majority of departments across the country. But we do know we've seen trends, everything from improved SCBA to the full PPE ensemble, making a difference in areas like firefighter burns and stuff like that. But as far as when we see that the combat deaths declining, yeah, that number has gone down significantly and goes down, but we're missing the areas where they increase. We're missing areas where guys are dying in training. We shouldn't really have guys dying in department training. That should be like the most safest area that we can get as far as creating a realistic condition. But yeah, we have guys dying.
Now after the guy's off the rock.
But yeah, I mean, but it goes in the context of what the training is. I found through looking through it, a lot of the training deaths, that involve SCBA training, smoke diver training, live fire training, things like that. The majority of the departments out there that have that fatality occur during those events, they don't have, just something simple as a BLS crew standing by. You read the report afterwards, you read the details, and it's like, the firefighter collapsed when coming out of the smoke maze. The crew started CPR, an ambulance was called. Well, why wasn't an ambulance there? I mean, we're doing training. Let's get everybody involved in that. We're supposed to be taking care of our members. So yeah, the core deaths go down, and we're good about that. But we're missing the areas where we see increases. Like I said earlier, vehicle deaths, training, and other areas.
Now, a couple of years back, there was a big, I want to say probably 10 to 8 years, there was a big push on vehicle positioning, wearing your vest. Did we see a decrease at all during that time period, and now it's coming back up? Because there was a big push for roadside and safety.
Yeah, that's increased. I think it was, I have to go back to double check the data, and I can do that when we come back. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago where we had a low point, the first for quite a long time in our line of duty deaths, but deaths involving vehicles went up fourfold. So do those highway safety positioning lessons, work their way down? Yeah, probably so after a period of 10 years, but then also now you've got a new generation coming into the service. So maybe those lessons aren't being hit up again. And so forth. So it goes on there. This year alone, we've got 3 guys that were killed. They were ejected no seatbelt use. So, it might be something where, okay, this trend goes down. Now we see it going back up. So we need to re-hit the past initiatives or maybe do something new. That should almost be expected because, I'm 49. So, when I came on, I learned things in a different way because things were taught in a different way. Guys that are 20 something now, they're coming on, they're being taught in a different way, learning in a different way. So, another 20 years, the new guys coming in, we might have to change some of those initiatives or just rework them in order to make that impact.
Well, that's a pretty good point. As you're talking, I'm thinking as my department's training officer and safety officer, I kind of take it for granted that the new guys coming in the door know the seatbelt policies, that they know that they have to wear their seatbelt. But we just hired some new recruits and I didn't address it with them because I'm just assuming that they know that it's required. And I'm going to go back today because there's 2 of them working today and make sure that they know. Those are the things that, we miss maybe as training officers because we just take things for granted that they were taught the right way to begin with in recruit school. Now, we send all of our recruits to the state recruit school, or we take laterals from other departments. So you never know how they were actually taught and if they know those basic lessons that we take for granted. So that's a really good point for somebody like me as a training officer to really revisit some of those basic things to make sure that all of our membership is aware that we're all learning the same thing.
And that's a lesson for any instructor out there. You get to a certain point where you think people know what you know, and then you're teaching and you gloss over something and somebody misses it. So you always got to check for that understanding. A funny story, Joey Birchtold teaches flashover for FDIC, and he's phenomenal flashover instructor. And I said, Joey, why don't you write an article on flashover? And he says, oh, they've all been written. And I said, yeah, but new people are coming into fire service every day. You have a body of expertise. They want to hear from you because you're current. You're doing this currently. You got to get out there and write. So for the members out there who are saying, oh, well, that article's already been written, whether it's Firefighter Nation, FireRescue, Fire Engineering, or any of our other platforms, there's always a new perspective on it. But also, there's new people coming into the fire service every day.
Another point, if I can add to what you're talking about with as far as the combat deaths, what I talk about when I present it occasionally or write about it is we need to look at what's statistically relevant as far as our line of duty death fatality. So as far as a training officer or as far as a chief officer working to see what the general fatality data is and then how it impacts this department, we need to look at also, what actually of the data applies to you. So that involves pushing more towards it, getting into the details of the data and, to follow up reports to find out, what of those categories matter to you as far as your department, how your department operates,
I just like to take this quick second to thank Tincata Fabrics, who sponsor our show, make this show possible. It's kind of interesting to think about that 7 out of 10 firefighters in the United States wear turnout gear that's made with Tincata Fabrics. So they cover a host of different manufacturers, but they give quality, goes right into every one of their products, and we thank them for sponsoring the show. One thing, I took a leadership class from Bobby Hall in Hartford, Connecticut. And it was real interesting. He started talking about line of duty deaths, and then he asked how many of our members died from suicide. And I was blown away by the numbers. And it was kind of disturbing. But then I look back when I used to live in a firehouse, and we had a member in the firehouse take his life, and in the back of a church parking lot. So it's real and it's happening. Do you want to speak to those numbers? I love putting people on the spot. That's great.
I will. Like I always mention when I talk about the fatality data, it's a discussion that you got to have smartly, and you got to take the emotion out of it, and that's hard to do. When you're talking about firefighters dying. So it's important to remember that what I'm going to say about firefighter suicides is about the data. Okay, it's not about the ones who take their lives. None of the organizations, the USFA, the NFFF, the IAFF, and the NFPA, None of them specifically track suicides. So we don't see that in our reports. Second, it's hard to have, for official notifications, a direct correlation made between what led up to the trigger incident and the firefighter's death. We're just now at a point where we have that template, if you will, that they called it with cancer, that allowed us last year at the National Fallen Firefighters Memorial Foundation, the Memorial Weekend, to include members of the FDNY who died of cancer, because doctors and the FDNY worked together to create that template where they could say, because X, Y, Z at ground zero and the days after, this is why this firefighter died. It boils down to the death was caused without any unreasonable doubt. Does that make sense? Meaning that yeah, he died because of this. So we don't have that with suicide. Now, I know socially and culturally, there's that push that pretty much any firefighter suicide is a PTSD related suicide. But again, we don't have that. We probably could say that, yes. But I go back to Dr. Geist and others when we were in that workshop a few years ago about this, working on, stress for the first responder. We don't know. So I don't count the suicide data, one, because the national organizations that give us the reports don't, and then two, because there's nothing really out there that can say definitively that all those numbers that we keep hearing about are directly caused by job-related PTSD.
I will say that, Bill, I agree with what you're saying, and I think the hard part is that attachment. To give you an example, I have one of my mentors, a very close friend of mine, Deputy Chief from a local department, Deputy Chief Ronald Mullen, who committed suicide. He killed himself. Do we believe that it was directly related to a line of duty death that he was the incident commander of? Absolutely. But do we have anything on paper that says that was his diagnosis? No, we don't. And I'm sure that Chief Mullen, like myself, like Frank, like Bill, like you have, we all have other stressors in our life that just keep adding into the cup. So I do agree with what you're saying, but I also do agree that we need to do a better job on a whole at taking care of each other through peer programs and peer counseling programs, and utilizing that as a first step, and then our EAP programs combined together to make sure that we're taking care of our membership, whether we're paid members or volunteer members, to help with that. But I do agree that that is an extremely challenging topic to actually quantify and to assign that all firefighter suicides are related to the job, because I don't believe they are. I'm with you. Do I believe that there's a good percentage of them? Absolutely. But how many? And then you have to look at, well, what other factors do they have to fill their cup or to fill their head to help push them to that brink? And then do they have any kind of mental health issues before even becoming a firefighter that added to that ultimate end? So I think that's a whole nother discussion that would be great to get some professionals in here maybe one day, one of these great Google Hangouts for fire engineering, and talk about that specifically, because that is a pretty challenging one to tackle.
Bill, have we seen any deaths in technical rescues?
Over the past, I'd say, going 10 years, technical, you mean as far as like the actual, rescue team assembled and working and operating?
Yes, like a confined space, high angle, anything like that.
There have been a few, but they haven't been as far as like members of actual technical team. There have been incidences where somewhat of a water rescue during a flooding operation, a member swept away, but that was like, part of the first arriving crew working, so the members killed that way. We did, last year we had the one member who died during a dive team operation that was a recovery for a missing boater. So there's that. But as far as like a hazmat incident, a confined space incident, killed in a building collapse, operating as a technical rescue team, no.
That's a good thing.
Well, if you think about it, though, if you approach that also like you were just out there today, so approach that in the same way as the hazmat situation. Those areas are slow moving operations in a sense where you're ticking the box. Unlike a fire where it's like seconds counting and everything's happening.
I agree. And the other issue that as we get to this point in the show that we're bound to discuss is cancer. Cancer rates in the fire service, they're definitely increasing. They're definitely on the rise. And we know why and we know how. And we need to start getting, in my opinion, to a better place of taking care of ourselves and doing gross decon on scene and really pushing departments to either have every member to have a second set of turnout gear, which we know is not possible in every department, or at least have a cache of spare gear that's sized for all their members. When they come back from fighting fire, that gear could come out of service. They can go into a spare set so they could wash that gear decon and push, changing their station uniforms and showering right away and doing that gross on-scene decon to include some type of wipes or cleaning your skin. And I'm not going to look to promote any certain products today, but really deconning your skin by wiping yourself down as soon as possible. And then the other thing is not allowing our kids to play with our gear when it's dirty. We all like to have the pictures of our kids wearing our fire helmets and our jackets and stuff, but think of what we're actually doing to them as well, and making sure that we have clean gear and that we're taking care of ourselves. Our good friend Chief Canterman here from Connecticut, who's a fire engineering instructor. He's the MC for the comedy night. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer this year, and he has a great article out there from June 21st of 2017 on when he was going through kind of his motions of when he was diagnosed and informing his wife and grabbing the team together and sitting down and putting a plan together. And those are realities. That's some things we have to talk about. Frank and I, Bill, we're very good friends and close with a great chief here from Connecticut, also the fire engineering instructor, Chris Pepler, who's been battling for 2 years. He's winning the war, but he's battling it every day.
Never smoked, hardly drank.
Yeah, never smoked, didn't drink, no chewing tobacco. He ended up with a form of mouth cancer. So it's a reality for us as firefighters. It's a reality for us as humans, let alone as firefighters. We're just increasing those, and we need to do a better job of taking that control over that and making an impact there as well.
Bill, what else did you find from this data that kind of jumps out at you?
The biggest thing was the continuance of members dying in training incidents due to medical problems, and we don't have the EMS on hand for them. This year, that number stands at 3. Vehicles operations or deaths involving vehicles, that's gone up this year. It's huge. Wildland season, that usually brings upon a few. They've gotten off to a good slow start. I mean, the past years we've already seen, minus the multiple fatality incidents, we've seen wildland firefighters, their fatalities be in the double digits, and this year that's considerably low. So on a whole, the combat deaths are dropping for that term, but again, we still have members who are dying due to medical issues, and they're added in there mostly because of either some type of service to the fire department because of the definition of on duty, or because of the inclusion of the Hometown Heroes Act.
For the vehicles, are individuals getting struck, or they're dying in the vehicles due to getting injected or motor vehicle accident?
This year, the first half of this year, it was 7 that were struck, and they involve everything from being struck doing working the scene of an MVA or with traffic, or we also have one that was backed over by apparatus. So yeah, it happens. It continues to happen. It will continue to happen.
I'd rather take my company when I was a lieutenant into a fire than on the highway, because the highway was always crazy. And we fought for years to get that additional engine company up there for blocking, and we finally got it. But the highway's dangerous, and if you're running a highway and you don't have a blocking company, that's something that you can institute right off the bat And if you don't have a policy on blocking, we didn't for years. I would pick up the radio as the lieutenant and call for an additional company for blocking. So you don't need a policy to call for an additional company to block.
What's unique though, also especially with the first half of this year with the vehicles, is two of them involved members who were on department business. So it's not emergency and completely just running errand for the department, and they were struck and killed in that way. So again, that goes back to understanding the definition of on-duty death, and then how that counts into the data for this year.
I was reading the comments here from Twitter. Thoughts on line of duty death potential related to training and unsafe technique or tricks that are being shown out there. So I guess they're referring to injuries in the fire during training. I don't know if that would really qualify as line of duty deaths. There's nothing that I'm familiar with as far as unsafe practices from tricks. Maybe you have something more on that than we have, Bill.
No, we haven't seen. I haven't seen. Those type of deaths where I don't know, maybe somebody was doing some type of bailout training and it was half a crazy and that's how they died. But it's generally in the training area, it's members who have we go back to past years and look at it. Members have had some type of either known or unknown medical condition that wasn't treated or wasn't identified, and they're conducting training without any check into whether they're fit for it, any check during or after whether they're okay, with any EMS on the scene. Then that's how the training deaths are panning out in this year and in the past years.
And with all the awareness, we've seen a big drop in live burn.
Yeah,
in a couple of years, it seems to be. So everybody's so aware of it now, and they're putting in extra engineered controls, or they're following NFPA 1403 to the hilt. But we're not really. I don't really see those training deaths out there.
There's another good question here, something that I wanted to get to with you, Bill, and it's from Doug Bledsoe. If I'm saying your name, Doug, right. If not, I apologize. And he says, Bill shouldn't be the only one working to sift through all this info and drive correct narratives. What other info tracking do we need? So I agree, because Bill, it seems like you're the only one that's really diving into this information the way that you are, and not just diving into it and sifting it, presenting it in a way that could be digested by the fire service as a whole. But what else do we need to do? What else as a fire service should we be doing individually and at the department level and also nationally to really make sense of all this information?
Well, a good friend at engineering once told me a couple years back when I was writing on this, and he said he'd asked me, hey, has anybody read the last couple of things that you did? And I said, I don't think so. It didn't look like it. I'm not big on data. I don't write for the data, but it's just one of those things you notice. And he said, why? And I said, why? He said, because you're talking about the truth of our data, and if a lot of people accepted that, there'd be a lot of organizations that would go out of business, because they're hinged on, the purpose of their organization is reduce deaths, so the deaths got to be there. What do we need to track the data better? I believe that the reporting needs to be changed, because again, every year you get the provisional report, which is maybe a couple pages, which just says X number of firefighters died on duty that previous year. And then maybe, midway through the quarter of the year, you get the full report. And so you get that same lump number, you get the same breakdown of categories, and there's at the end, appendices and occasional narratives about that. And that's it. And that's all that's given. And we know that, my generation, the younger generations, learning differently, learning on the fly, having learned fast, and social media, we're taking it for granted that guys are actually reading those full reports and then going back and looking at what's referenced in there. So the reporting needs to change. It needs to have what I would call on-duty deaths, which would count all those as defined by, the definitions, defined by the definitions, but then also operational deaths. So you can take a look at, how firefighters are dying on the fire ground or on the accident scene or on the rescue scene, stuff like that, or you can get a real handle on how firefighters are dying, as opposed to, other areas with extremes. The report that's going to come out for, well, the report that came out for last year, the report that's coming out for this year, it's going to have stuff in there, like if you really read into it, guy has a heart attack while changing the mud flap on an ambulance. Guy has a heart attack while pushing a patient into the ER. Guy gets sick at fire department meeting and doesn't wake up the next day at home. So do we need to change the tracking of the data? No, we're getting it pretty good. The trouble is we need to disseminate it, into what matters most to us. Again, like what I said, what's statistically relevant to your operation. That's what we need, truly.
And the other thing I always said that we need is, we get great line of duty death reports, and, if you take the time to actually read through them. But what I always thought would be great is if there was a training module that came out. Frank may take a line of duty death here in the city of New Haven and put something together for his department. I may put a small PowerPoint or training program together in my department. I know a friend of ours, Jim Duffy, he does the kitchen table line of duty death review with his shift all the time and gives it to some of his junior members. But they're all going to be a little bit different. They're all going to be a little inconsistent. So if USFSA came out with an actual training program, or NIOSH when they did the line of duty death reports and they have this great data, put that into a consistent training program so we can spread a consistent message or analysis of the line of duty death across all of our memberships. It's focused all the way from the rookie all the way up to the chief officer, so we can truly learn from every incident as well. Not just tracking the data, but now what do we do with this data? And are we doing it consistently and truly learning? Like, I'm going to talk about this slide before we finish, this picture you put up on Facebook. You asked the last question. I'm going to go through this in a minute, but how did the other 45 die? How many in the fire service truly know that answer? And I'm sure, like I said, I don't know about the data on this, Bill. I don't know how many people actually saw this picture you put up on Facebook, but how many saw it and how many actually knew the answer? Or how many knew at least 50% of the answer? We need to answer those questions. We need to do a better job as a whole so every firefighter in this country knows that answer like that and not have to, let me go look.
There's another part to that. When we talk about, those deaths out, or when I say they're outside of the traditional line of duty death type of fatality, if you look at those other 45, the majority of them, and you look at, what the narrative is on those, and there's a lot of push, and there's a lot of preach, and there's a lot of drive for the fire service organizations and chiefs and leaders to be a bit more holistic in how we treat and care for our members. Some simple little things like, if there's a guy out that's on your shift and he leaves the shift, not feeling well, just something simple as a follow-up phone call to the house, or maybe sending the medic crew out to check on him. Little things like that. Could they make a huge difference? I don't know. We don't know the whole story for each of those deaths, but we do know that when we have like a member leaving the shift because he's sick, or a guy not feeling well at training but goes home, or the guy that's got like the shoulder injury from pulling hose and just not doing well at the fire scene and he goes home, and then you see that they were unresponsive the next day at the house. Just something a little, just to check and say, hey, I noticed you weren't feeling so hot when we were at that fire. How you doing now? Checking on you at night, checking on you in the morning. It incorporates all that behavioral stuff that we talked about as far as caring for our members, and it could, who knows? It could reduce some of those numbers.
Absolutely. If it reduces it by one, that's making an improvement.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm a big advocate of the peer support teams. And many think that the peer support teams should be only utilized for those major incidents where we're talking about critical incident stress. Man, the thought and the process behind the peer support is taking care of each other. Being at the kitchen table in the morning, having a cup of coffee, knowing that somebody is going home and maybe they're not feeling so good. Maybe they're dealing with some stuff at home. Maybe they did a call last night that wasn't a significant call, but yet it's a trigger for them for something that's occurred a couple years down the road. And making sure that they don't walk out of the door of the firehouse that day to go home feeling down, not knowing that there's people there that care about them and can help them. So I'm a big advocate of the peer support system, which would definitely help with that, some of those things that we were talking about. So I think that it's something that we really need to be looking at.
One thing that we can glean from the NIOSH line of duty deaths is that we're pretty much making the same mistakes over and over again. It's not, the devil's not really in the detail. It's communications, failure to call for enough help, not coordinating your tactics, failure for accountability. Those things don't seem to be changing in any of these reports. Anthony Castro's calls it the NIOSH 5. So most departments, if you're a training officer out there, most guys could, and girls, could go back to their department and write the NIOSH line of duty report death for their department, because most places have staffing issues, accountability issues, communications issues, uncoordinated tactics issues. So those are the things that our training officers should work to correct. Bill, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, they should work on that. But again, I mean, if the focus is the reduction of line of duty deaths, and that focus is on your members of your department, then you got to understand that the majority of members, will suffer a medical line of duty death as opposed to a operational line of duty death. So there, what they want to look at, beyond the NIOSH, structure fire reports, is the NIOSH medical reports, because yeah, they're going to be the same recommendations also. But what you're going to learn is you're going to learn that, the victim had this type of condition or that type of condition, or the department had this type of wellness program or didn't have that type of wellness program. And you're going to pick up on those things, hopefully, as a leader in your department, and say, you know what, we're just like this department, or we're almost like these guys. What do I need to do to get things going so I can look out for their health? I mentioned at Andy Frederick's training days last year. There was a department in Georgia that suffered a line of duty death. This is for 2016, and so the USFA notice comes out, and he died of a medical problem on a fire scene, and that's it. And let's to be honest, those aren't the popular ones that get read all the time, as opposed to some guy dying in a collapse or a flashover. So then, it's a year now, the NIOSH report comes out about that one, and you read through the details and you find out 2016, you have a department that the only thing you need to have to be a member, operating member of that department, is to be 18 years of age, and have a driver's license. That is it.
That's crazy. I think you
so wait a minute. But wow, yeah, we need to focus on building collapse and flashover and those things. We also got to realize that we might have more departments out there where the only thing that you need to do to be able to get on the rig and pull a line is, be out of high school and be able to drive.
I think you have a really good point, Bill. If we see the medical NIOSH report, we just put it to the side. We always focus on the operational ones because it's sexier and it's what everybody wants to talk about. But maybe we, at the kitchen table, need to actually pull out that medical report and go over it quickly to kind of give everybody that mental check. I think that's a great idea, because I know that I wouldn't have done it before having this conversation. Yeah. Maybe if I read one, it'll get me to start eating better.
Well, Bill, we're getting to that, that 1 hour mark, and that's what we try to hold these shows to, each and every week that Fire Engineering holds these Hump Day Hangouts. But before we wrap up, I want to give you another minute or two or a couple minutes to kind of wrap up what you're talking about here, wrap up your challenge to us, and what you want Frank and I to do, and what you want every other member of the fire service to start doing as we look at line of duty deaths.
Well, the biggest thing I hope somebody were to get from what I write about and what I talk about would be don't give in to fear. It's easy, especially in this day and age, to be caught up on Facebook and Twitter and everything else, and just be led that the world's coming into an end because guys are dying and wind-driven fires and building collapses and stuff like that. Yeah, there might be those. But when we look at the majority of our line of duty deaths, that's not always the case, and hasn't been for many years. So, don't be absent-minded. Don't be foolish. Don't give in to the fear. But then also, as Andy Frederick said, research, research, research. You know, there's nothing that can stop any of us from just taking time and just reading, whether it's one report or looking up one news story or going back to one notification and looking at how they died, you know, what were the conditions and things like that, putting that information together. And also just, heck, if it's just reading, you know, the stuff that we put on Firefighter Nation, Fire Engineering regarding all our line of duty deaths, just getting that approach that, you know, it's more to it than structural firefighting. Not meaning that we need to lessen, you know, the safety towards that area anymore, but when we talk about reducing line of duty deaths, you know, we need to focus on constantly the majority of them, and the majority of them are medical, and of those, a lot of those are just included in there because of definitions.
I think that's great, Bill. And, you know, I really wish some of these shows were greater than an hour, because it always seems like we really start getting that good momentum at like that 40, 45-minute mark. But we're definitely going to have you back on in the near future. I thank you for everything that you do for the fire service and, you know, the Fire Nation group and everything that you do every day for your full-time job, but also this research and the data and the way that you're putting it out there. So personally, thank you for what you do. And I wanted to end with reading this slide. I kind of threw out as a teaser before, because it asked the question. So this is something that Bill put up on Facebook, and it's just a picture, basically, probably off a PowerPoint slide saved as a JPEG. It says, on duty deaths January to June 2017. Total was 51. Advancing hose lines, 4. Ventilation, 1. Search and rescue, 1. He goes into some greater details as far as those categories. But then he asks the question, how did the other 45 die? You as a fire service representative, especially a fire service representative that's tuning in today, and Shannon's telling us we have a really good turnout today for the live viewers, which means we'll have great numbers for the archive show. So if you're watching, if you're listening, if you're following us on Twitter, answer that question. Not to us, but to yourself. Answer that question to your departments and start doing something today to impact that number in your department. So, Bill, thank you very much for everything that you do. Thanks to Takata. And Frank, it's yours to close out the show today.
No, I'd just like to thank Takata Fabrics for making this all possible. And Bill, keep up your great work. We'd love to see your stuff on Twitter. I retweet it all the time. You're out in the forefront of this. And like I said, when you look out your window tomorrow or you're driving on the road and you see that deer, no, it's more dangerous than a structure fire if you have proper staffing, proper training, and proper education. So we can all do a better job out there, and I think that's the important thing. The roadway thing we've got to pay attention to. Members shouldn't be getting struck, and members should be wearing seatbelts. I mean, that's just stuff that should be just second nature now, and we all need to do a better job with physical fitness. And last bit of advice I'm going to take right from Bill, and I'm going to take Bill's advice. Let's not put aside the line of duty death report for when it's a medical. Let's make everybody read it, because maybe that might be the catalyst to change some behavior, because we all need to change our behavior a little bit, including myself. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Be safe.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.